All right, so today I'll take some time to talk about regret. Regret. It's an emotion that everyone has had at one point in your life or the other. It's a human response to a hard present. So when we are going through hardship, it's very easy for us to look back and see what was the cause of where we are, how we found ourselves in a hard, uncomfortable, undesirable situation. Regret. We've all felt regret at one point in our lives or the other. And today I want to talk about regret. And this podcast was largely inspired by a conversation I was having with one of my friends and mentees. And, you know, he had been going through some very hard um, times, both in his mind, basically a lot of mentally challenging times, emotionally challenging times. And just talking with him, he was relaying some of his thoughts and feelings to me. And while I listened to him, I really didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to say, but I just felt a need to listen. And I believe listening is very important, and not being in a haste to speak, because I realized a lot of people just want to air and want to be heard. And so I took my time and just tried to listen and totally empathize with him. And you know, yesterday I asked him a question, which is a question I asked myself recently when I was going through some, pretty challenging times in my life too, that made me like go back and just say, Tola, where did you miss it? So it's very easy for us to find ourselves in challenging times. And the first thing we go to is, what did I do wrong? You understand? So we begin to reflect. But then I think reflection should end up in realization. But for us, a lot of us take this very, very sharp detour to regret. Between realization and regret, it's just a very it's a fork in the road, but a very slight angled fork in the road. So you don't even know that you've gone on the path of regret rather than path of realization. And so you see, we begin to ask ourselves, where did I get it wrong? Where did I get it wrong? And then regret is a state of mind where you kind of feel, if I could go back to the past, I would cut out this part of my life. And this is what I asked my mentee yesterday. I said, look, if you could edit a part of your life from the present state you are right now, going backwards, you can't edit the future. You understand? Because you don't know it. What would you edit? And I call him my friend because I enjoy talking with him. He's very open with me. And so he was very open and told me the things he would edit in his life. He really stated them out. And a lot of them were not new things to me. They are things he had expressed in the past. And I realized I had done that too in my life. You understand? I thought, oh, Tola, maybe you shouldn't have done this. Maybe you shouldn't have done this. If I could just cut out this part of my life and just do it all over again, I would just cut out this part and just, if you could play God with our past and our present right now, our life will end up much differently. And that is where regret starts from. I shouldn't have done this. We beat ourselves up so much and just say, God, just give me the chance to go back. You see, a desire for the chance to go back is the difference between regret and realization. When you desire so much to be able to go back to something and change something and say something and do something, that's regret. But when you think of it and say, going forward, this is how I will handle it, that's realization. It's a very slight difference. They both think of something that has happened, but one thinks of it going forward, the other one thinks of it wishing they could go back. Now, God doesn't desire for us to regret. And in talking about regret today, I'm going to go into the Bible. And there's something God showed me in the Bible when this my mentee shared his some of the things he regretted about the past with me. And when I started thinking about things I was beginning to regret about my past, God showed me something and said, you should never regret your past. You see, a lot of us don't understand when we say God is omniscient, omnipotent, and omnipresent. We do not understand those things. And it's very hard for the human mind to conceive that. It's very hard. As much as we think we understand it, it's just like a dog understanding the internet. Even man has not totally understood the internet. It's just like each of us now trying to understand AI. We really do not understand the concept of AI, how it works, how it gets its information, how it works so fast. We think we do, but we do not really understand it. And the same way, we do not truly understand God. We have no idea. So we always see God through the eyes of man. We see God through the eyes of man in the perspective of the most perfect man, the most perfect human. A lot of us, our thoughts and our perception of God is that of a superhuman. But God is not a superhuman. God is not human. So when we think of God as all powerful, we think of God as all powerful as a human gets. So sometimes we might tell ourselves that we are thinking of God not as a human, but when we think of power, we think of power through the human eyes. When we think God is omniscient, God knowing all, we think of God knowing all. We think of knowledge in terms of knowledge of subject matters, knowledge in terms of everything, but knowledge is way deeper than that in God. God is awareness. You understand? God's knowledge supersedes subject matters. God is awareness. So what I'm trying to say, when we say God is all knowing, God, the way I can put it is that God creates knowledge by thinking about it. And that's still a human way of putting it, but it becomes a subject matter because God thought about it. God doesn't think about subject matters. God creates subject matters. You understand? I want to think about God being all present. We think about God being with us everywhere, but we don't understand that God being all present means God is in all dimensions of time. God is in the present, is in the present, he is in the past. He was not in the past, he's still there. And God is in the future. Those things do not exist to God. God is all present. We don't understand these things, and it's perfectly okay not to understand this thing. But we live in regret because we feel God is limited in strength, God is limited in knowledge, and God is limited in presence. And He is not. So when we regret things, we kind of feel, why did I do this? You understand? And we kind of, God, if I could go back. And that's us saying, God, that's us trying to relinquish control from God, saying, if I could go back, I would stop this thing from happening, stop this, stop this, stop this. And that's kind of telling us God just stood by and watched things happen and was helpless. And that goes against God's nature of being all powerful. You see, when you look at the Bible, there are a couple of characters in the Bible, and they all, I'm going to limit it to 3 characters, but you can go through the Bible, it's everywhere in the Bible. I'm going to look at 3 characters from the New Testament. I'm going to look at Peter, I'm going to look at Paul, and I'm going to briefly look at a disciple of Peter, of Jesus called Nathaniel. I'm going to briefly look at Nathaniel. Is not someone that is really, is not a prominent figure in the Bible. You understand? Not prominent. But then Jesus' encounter with this disciple called Nathaniel proves something to us that we should take note of. Now, when Jesus called, in fact, Jesus not directly called Nathaniel. What happened was that Nathaniel had a friend called Philip, and Philip found Jesus. Philip was introduced to Jesus, and Philip was like, wow, we found the Messiah. Now, obviously, Nathaniel and Philip had been talking about this Messiah, this man to come. And so it has been an ongoing conversation. So when Philip found Jesus, he went to tell his friend Nathaniel that, look, we found this guy we've been talking about and been waiting for. He's real. Come and see him. And so Nathaniel was excited, got to Jesus, and at first he was skeptical. I said, where's this guy from? He's from Nazareth. Oh, Nazareth, nothing good can come out of there, because Nazareth was a good for nothing place. It was not the best of places, you understand? But nothing. It was nothing. It was a viceful place. Nothing. It was like bottom of the map for them. Nothing good comes out of there. So he was already skeptical about Jesus being the real deal. So, but then he took his friend's word for it. And when he met Jesus, Jesus called his name and talked about him like he had known him for a while. And Nathanael was like, "How do you know me?" And Jesus said something. He said, "While you were under the fig tree," because that's where he was when Philip called him. Philip went to meet him under the fig tree. "I saw you." What Jesus was trying to say was like, before you saw me, I saw you. I've been watching you. I've been watching you. And you see, that why we see Jesus was not just man, it was God. He had seen Nathanael, and God knows how much he had seen about Nathanael. But he just pointed to one incident. While you were under the fig tree, I had seen you. I saw what you were doing. I saw you pricing apples. I saw you pricing pear. I saw you scratching your head. I saw everything. I saw everything. I'm aware. So God showed us his omnipresent nature there. That he was aware. That was just the encounter. But before the encounter was the awareness of Nathanael. The encounter was a time that was totally defined by God. It had to happen at that time. Everything led up to that time. It was not chance. It was not mistake. It was carefully planned that he would come from under the fig tree to meet Jesus. And this was pretty much the case with Jesus and other disciples. He had his eyes on them even before they ever laid their eyes on him. And the same thing with you listening to me today. God is aware of you even before you became aware of him. He was aware. He is aware of you. Before you became aware of him, he became aware of you. He was aware of you. That past situation that you saw yourself and you thought you were alone and just thought, "Oh, I did this, and God, I'm so sorry I did this, and I wish I could just go back and expunge it." God is saying, "I was aware." I want us to know that every part of our past was intended. Every deed, every misdeed, every act of misdemeanor or serious offense, I want to let you know that God was aware of it. And it was an ingredient to make you totally prepared for the encounter. God was not standing helplessly when you were committing those terrible acts. I want you to know this. God was not standing helplessly and just say, "Oh, I wish I could get this guy's attention." No, God is not weak. God is all powerful. You see, when we live in regret, we don't get the concept of God. So for you to think when you were doing those terrible things that you are now ashamed of, God was just wishing, "Oh, I wish I could get his attention or get her attention." No. God was there. And God was looking at you and saying, "She's not yet ready yet. She needs to add one more thing, one more mistake, one more misdeed, one more misdemeanor. She's not yet ready. He's not yet ready." God was there. All those things were for your equipping. A lot of people think our equipping was in a time of useful learning, a time of doing something virtuous. No, some of it was a time of doing something shameful. God was there. He saw you while you were doing whatever it is you were doing before your encounter with him. He was there, and it was like, not yet done. It's just like when someone is cooking, when you're cooking something, maybe you're cooking meat, or baking a cake. You see, I have a sister-in-law that bakes cakes, and I saw her doing it once. She did it once from the house, and my wife does it from time to time too. See, baking a cake is such a science. Such a science, an incredible science. Anything goes off, the cake won't come out right. It's either it becomes too dense, it doesn't rise, it becomes too flat, it's not sweet enough, it's just the cakes, anything. One egg shot, just a few a few drops of milk short. You understand? Just not mixing it enough. It just won't come out right. Cake is a science. It's not an art. The making of cake is a science. Cooking is a science. Anything off. So when people bake cakes, they put them in, and as a point, they put knives in them. They put a knife in the cake and they bring it out. And if the knife still has stuff on, they know that it's not yet cooked on the inside. The knife has to come out clean. So sometimes it looks good on the outside, but you'll be like, it's already smelling good. You understand? Now, for you as a layman, you think this thing is good for eating, but they'll put the knife and say, it's not yet done, shove it back in the oven. That's how God is with us. A lot of you think you met God by accident. You think that day you met God was just a random day that you just happened to allow God to meet you. A man thinks we are so much in control, but you're not. That was the day the knife was put in you and it came out clean. And God said it's time for the encounter. I want to talk about Paul in the Bible, who started out as a man called Saul in the Bible. I don't think a lot of people understand how checkered Paul's past was. Paul was an oppressor of the church. And then there was not even church, they were just followers of Christ. And Paul hated them with a passion. And it was designed for him to hate them. You see, Paul never regretted the things he didn't, but he never wrote that he regretted, never regretted. He realized that everything happened for him to become the person he was meant to be. You see, when you read of Paul's encounter with Jesus, his conversion story is a very popular story in the Bible. You see it in 3 places. I think in Acts chapter 9, Acts 22, when he was talking, I think with King Agrippa, he was one relating the story again. And I think Acts 26 or 28, I'm not sure. I think Acts 26. You would see the story of Paul. And you see, when Jesus met Paul, the encounter of Jesus and Paul, he said there, a lot of us think Jesus asked Paul a question. Because the first thing Jesus said to Paul is, and then he was still called Saul. His name wasn't Paul. Then he said, Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? A lot of us read this like Jesus was asking a question. Jesus wanted to know why Paul was persecuting him. So we read it wrong. Because I have you know that God is all-knowing, is all-powerful, and is ever-present. So God doesn't ask why. He knows the answer to everything. So when Jesus said, Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? It was not from a place of not knowing. He wasn't waiting for an answer. Jesus was not waiting for an answer. He wasn't. This was a rhetorical question, not an inquisitive question. And that's why when you read that scripture everywhere, whether in Acts 9, Acts 22, or Acts 26, there is nowhere where Paul narrates that thing and says, Jesus asked. He always said, Jesus said, and he said, and he said. He never said as a question. It wasn't a question. It was a rhetorical question. You know what rhetorical questions are? Rhetorical questions are for revelations. It's when the person asking the question is about to reveal something to you. The person is not waiting for an answer. Why have you persecuted me? Jesus was kind of saying, I'm going to tell you why you've been persecuted. Why all this has been allowed to happen. Why have you persecuted me? And when you read Acts 26, other versions do not put it this way, but Acts 26, when Paul was talking to King Agrippa, when he was making his case, the other part of the Bible where this story is narrated, he didn't say this, but in Acts 26, he says this. He says, why have you persecuted me? That's what Jesus said. And Jesus followed it up by saying, so you will know that you cannot fight against my will. What Jesus was saying is, the reason you've been persecuting me and I've allowed it to go by is because I want you to understand that nobody can fight against my will. Nobody can persecute me. Nobody can push me back and win. God wanted Paul to understand that. That's why God allowed him to persecute. God was not weak. You see, God could have appeared to Paul at any time. God is all powerful. So we think of God as just saying, God just saw the opportune time when he was going to Damascus and just said, this is an opportunity. No. God has opportunity every single time. God makes opportunity. God doesn't watch out for opportunity. The fact that God shows up, God makes every time an opportunity. God decides opportunity. He doesn't watch out for it. God did not wait for the opportunity to meet Paul. God created the ideal time when Paul was fully ready to be converted, for him to have that encounter. God could have shown up to Paul the moment he was born, and that light would come out, and God will talk to him. God could have shown up to Paul at the point where he ordered for the stoning of Stephen, and he stood and people were putting their jackets down at his feet. The light could have come out at that time, but Paul wasn't ready at that time. Paul was ready at the time he was going to Damascus to understand that you can never win against God, no matter how hard you push. Why was it important for Paul to learn this lesson? And this is why we must never have regrets. Because everything we do, it might be ugly in our sight, but God sees as an ingredient towards preparing us as his instrument. That's why God called Paul, this man, he's my instrument. So when he sent him to a man called Ananias, Ananias said, this man's a wicked man. Oh, he has killed so many people. You're sending him to me. And God said, no, he's not a wicked man. He's my instrument. Every single thing he did was an opportunity to refine him as my instrument. Now he's ready to express. He should never regret, because everything I allowed so that he can become a full expression of what I want him to do. Paul had to learn this lesson. You cannot push against my will, because Paul was about to go on the most pushback in Bible history that any other character in the Bible before him had ever faced. Paul had the most pushback of every character in the Bible. Nobody got more pushback than Paul. Paul's life had to be one of him being the oppressor so that he can learn to stand when he is oppressed. So he had no reason to regret his past. It was an equipping. The same thing with Peter. When Jesus met Peter, he was a fisherman. Peter was a fisherman. That's what he did. After Jesus met him and told him to cast his net and he caught fish, Jesus said, now you are ready. The encounter was not ready at that point. God could have told him before he entered his boat, I want you to be my disciple. God had been watching Peter from the time Peter was born. The time he entered his boat was not a random time. It was not an opportunity. Oh, let me quickly take this opportunity. It wasn't an opportunity. It was when Peter was fully prepared. It was an equipping. It was everything was leading up to that perfect time of the encounter. So when God told Peter, you have been fishing for fish. I watched you and I allowed you fish for fish. You see, so Peter had no time. You see, some of us will regret time sunk. So we're like, why? I just wasted a lot of my life working in a bank And then I realized when I was 50 that I should be doing this. Oh, why did I waste so much? Didn't waste any time. That means you're saying God is weak. God allowed you to stay in that bank. He allowed you to stay till you were 50 because he knew that when you were 50, you were fully tuned as an instrument, ready for the encounter. Never regret your past. Never regret your past. The devil thinks he's winning when he's making you do things before your encounter. Look, never regret it. As long as you have an encounter, never regret the things that you did that preceded your encounter. God is always winning. Some of you just say, man, I was so promiscuous. I slept with so many girls. I slept with so many guys. Oh man, it just keeps me awake at night. Why? Don't you know that God wants to use all those things? All those things. If God can use the murderous nature of Paul, what man sees as wickedness, what Ananias saw as, don't bring this man to me. And God says, no, you don't see, this man is my instrument. God wants to use you. And everything that you've done up until your encounter is for an equipping. I must have you know that in some instruments on the inside, you will see parts of it that are sharp, parts of it that seem ugly, some that are dirty, rusty. Have you ever opened a car before? Open the engine of a car. Not everything is shiny. Not everything is glossy. Some parts of the car are so ugly. Some of it are so ugly. Some of them are filled with oil. But the fact that they are filled and they are smeared with oil shows that they are functioning. The day they become clean, the car will not function well. A car has some ugly parts, but they are all important for the functioning of the car. Never regret anything in your past, especially when you've come to an encounter with Christ. The encounter is always a powerful one. A lot of us don't understand that when God meets with us, it's never weak. When we are ready, it's powerful. When God was ready to meet with Peter, strong, burly man, was like, God, please just leave me, just go away from me because I am not worthy. God said, you are worthy. Exactly how you are ready. I do not see anything about you as ugly. Do you know what Peter was saying? Peter thought back of his past. The Bible doesn't record why Peter said, I'm unworthy. People don't think Peter was not being humble. You don't know what Peter could have done. As a fisherman, he could have done the worst of things. He might have been a wife beater. I'm not saying he was, but he might have been. He just thought of, why are you using? Because everything about you. You know, for Peter to have taken a knife to cut somebody's ears when Jesus was arrested, it wasn't his first time wielding a weapon. It's not easy to just cut somebody's ears. That means he was someone he was a street fighter. God knows how many ears he had cut before then. I said, God, do you know me? I don't cut ears, though. I cut ears where? I'm just saying, yes, I know you cut ears. That's why all those things were equipment. I see it. I was there when you're cutting the ear. And I was like, this guy is being sharpened. He's being sharpened. It looks ugly, but I will use it all. God is going to use everything. He doesn't throw away anything. The encounter. As long as you say yes at the point of encounter, never regret anything that happened before that. Look, you're not condemned before your encounter. Nobody before the encounter is condemned. Nobody. You are being sharpened. No matter what you're doing, no matter how bad, you're not condemned. The only condemned person is the person that has the encounter with the Almighty God, with the all-powerful God, with the all-knowing God. And I think that encounter is not a slight thing. Once you have that encounter and you now decide to say no, God says that is the only sin that is unforgivable. The rejection When the encounter, it's just like at that point when God called Paul, and Paul now says, "I'm blind, though. You blind, but I'm not going. I'm not going to say that." That's the height. That is condemnation. And I want to have you know that is very hard. It's almost impossible to reject. That's why you hardly see it. It's almost impossible. Almost. It's almost impossible. Very hard. Because the encounter is strong. The encounter is strong. And everything that happens in your life happens towards that encounter. Our answer when we are asked if we could edit anything out of our lives should always be, I would change nothing. Because when I change something, my life would stop to work. My life wouldn't function anymore. Just like with a car. With a car, when you look at a car and say, is there any part of this car you will take out? Any part of the car you take out at your risk. You take out at the risk of the functioning of the car. Any part. I remember the car I'm driving right now, there was this part of the exhaust. It was just a cover. It was alloy. It was plastic. It was an alloy cover over the exhaust. So at the point it started to shake, and instead of me to fix it, I was like, I'll fix it later. Then I left it. And one day I just got home and it has fallen out. I didn't know where it fell off. On the express, in the neighborhood, I couldn't find it again. And I thought to myself, what's the worst that could happen? Just a useless plastic, silver plated part. It's not the exhaust. Then 2 weeks later, I looked at the back of my car and I saw the smoke from the exhaust had blackened the whole part around the exhaust. Blackened it, changed the color of the paint. And I realized, wow. So that little plastic cover was for something. I had no right to let it get lost. It has affected some of the functionalities of the car. Everything is important. Both the ugly, the small, the insignificant, it's all important. We must never live in regret. God is all-knowing. He was there when you were doing all those things, when you were hanging out with those people, when you were smoking those substances, when you were using those bad words, when you were abusing people, when you were molesting. He was there. He was there. It's hard to believe. And that's because we think of God with the knowledge of man. He knows, he was aware. And he knew that you were not ready. He knew that you were not ready. That's why he didn't jump and stop you at that time. Because God doesn't jump. God shows up gloriously. Jumping means you are not aware. He doesn't jump to save the day. He shows up waiting for you there, ready, expecting you to come. We must live our life without regret. We must realize who God is. He's all-knowing. He's all-powerful. And is all-present. My name is Tola T.A. Alabi, and this is the TA Podcast.